The strange death of Mary Reeser, a mystery that baffles science to this day. What would you do if you stumbled upon a mystery so strange, so unexplainable, that even the brightest scientific minds were left baffled? This is the story of Mary Reeser, a 67-year-old woman whose death in 1951 shocked the world and became one of the most perplexing forensic mysteries of all time. From theories of spontaneous combustion to extraterrestrial involvement, Mary's story raises questions that remain unanswered to this day. Who was Mary Reeser, the quiet life of an ordinary woman? Mary Hardy Reeser was born on March 3, 1884, in the small town of Waynesville, Ohio. Little is known about her early life, but what is certain is that by the time of her death, she was leading a quiet, unremarkable existence. She was a widow, living alone in a modest apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida. Mary had been married to a man who had passed away years earlier, and she had one son, Dr. Richard Reeser, a physician who lived nearby. Though she had a family, Mary lived a solitary life, marked by routine and peacefulness. Known to be kind but private, Mary's days were filled with simple tasks. Her health, while not perfect, was typical for someone of her age. She had struggled with sleep in recent years and relied on sleeping pills to help her rest. But there was nothing extraordinary about her condition that might have led anyone to suspect the horrific fate awaiting her. Her peaceful life, however, would take a horrifying turn one night. And it was a turn that would ultimately lead to one of the most puzzling cases in forensic history. The night before, a routine evening that would lead to the impossible. On the evening of July 1st, 1951, Mary Reeser went through her usual routine. Her son, Dr. Richard Reeser, had visited her that evening. The two spoke briefly, and she mentioned that she felt drowsy from the sleeping pills she had taken. After their conversation, he left to continue with his evening. That was the last time anyone would see Mary alive. Around 9 p.m., Mary settled into her favorite chair in her apartment. She was wearing her usual nightgown and slippers, and she likely intended to get a good night's sleep. But what happened after that is what has confounded investigators and scientists for decades. The next morning, Mary Reeser was dead, but the circumstances surrounding her death are what make this case so extraordinary. The morning after, a scene that defies logic. On the morning of July 2, 1951, Pansy Carpenter, Mary's landlady, went to deliver a telegram to Mary's apartment. As she approached the door, she noticed that the metal handle was unusually warm to the touch. Alarmed, Pansy called the police. When authorities arrived, they entered the apartment and found the scene that would baffle the world for years to come. Mary's body was gone, reduced to a pile of fine ash. The only remains were part of her spine and a single foot, still clad in a slipper. The chair she had been sitting in was completely destroyed. It had burned so intensely that only the most minimal remnants of its structure remained. But here's the inexplicable part. The rest of the apartment showed almost no damage. The walls and ceiling were mostly intact, and even stacks of newspapers near the fire were untouched by the flames. The carpet was unburned, and the heat did not seem to have spread. It was as though the fire had focused solely on Mary's body, leaving everything else around her untouched. The science of fire, why Mary's death shouldn't be possible. To understand why this case is so perplexing, we need to take a closer look at the science of fire. A human body, when fully consumed by fire, requires intense heat, typically over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius. Cremation ovens, designed to burn bodies, reach such temperatures and operate for several hours before a body is reduced to ash. But Mary's body was consumed in a matter of hours, with no apparent external heat source. Even stranger, crematoriums are specifically designed to ensure that heat is evenly distributed. In Mary's case, the fire seemed to focus almost exclusively on her body. The surrounding areas, clothing, furniture, and even the carpet remained unscathed. How is this possible? How can a body burn so intensely while leaving the rest of the room largely untouched? The laws of thermodynamics seem to be bent, if not completely broken. Initial theories. Accidental ignition? At first, the police and investigators considered the possibility that Mary had fallen asleep while smoking a cigarette. This was not an unreasonable assumption. Mary was known to have smoked occasionally, and she may have dropped a lit cigarette that started a fire. But this theory quickly ran into several problems. Intensity of the fire. A cigarette alone would not burn hot enough to reduce a human body to ash. Lack of spread. If a cigarette ignited a fire, the flames should have spread to the rest of the apartment. But that didn't happen. The investigators were left with more questions than answers, and they turned to other, more complex theories. The spontaneous human combustion theory, fact or fiction? One of the first theories to gain traction was spontaneous human combustion. This idea has been around for centuries, with proponents arguing that certain rare and specific conditions could cause a person to burst into flames without any external ignition. In cases of SHC, the victim's body is usually found severely burned or reduced to ash, but their surroundings remain surprisingly intact. In some of the more famous cases of alleged SHC, witnesses report seeing a faint glow or unusual warmth before the fire starts. Could Mary's death have been caused by spontaneous human combustion? Lack of evidence. There's no solid evidence supporting the idea of SHC. Many skeptics believe that cases labeled as SHC can be explained by external factors, like arson or a nearby ignition source. Theories of heat buildup. Some speculate that certain medical conditions could cause a buildup of flammable gases or heat in the body, which could lead to an internal combustion. However, no conclusive research supports this claim. Despite the lack of evidence, SHC remains a tantalizing and horrifying possibility for many. The wick effect, a scientific explanation? Another scientific explanation that gained traction is the wick effect. This theory proposes that a person's body fat can act as a fuel source, with the clothing serving as a wick. It's similar to the way a candle burns. Once lit, the fat melts and burns slowly, sustaining the fire for hours. In the case of Mary Reeser, her body fat and the sleeping pills she had taken could have created the perfect conditions for the wick effect to occur. While the wick effect offers a more plausible explanation than spontaneous combustion, there are still challenges with this theory. How could such an intense fire occur without spreading beyond the immediate area? Could the body really burn that completely, even with the wick effect in play? Supernatural and paranormal theories, ghosts, curses, and divine punishment. As the case captured public attention, many wild theories began to surface. Some believed that Mary's death was caused by supernatural forces. Was she cursed? Did a malevolent spirit cause the fire? Could this have been some kind of divine retribution for sins unknown? The paranormal community was quick to latch on to the idea that Mary's death was a result of something beyond human understanding. Ghosts, curses, and divine intervention became part of the public narrative, even though these explanations had no evidence to support them. Alien intervention? Could extraterrestrials be involved? Perhaps one of the most outlandish theories proposed was that Mary's death was caused by aliens. This theory suggested that advanced extraterrestrial technology could have caused her body to ignite in the strange manner described by investigators. Though it captured the imagination of conspiracy theorists, there was no credible evidence to suggest any involvement from extraterrestrials. But the idea of alien intervention adds an eerie and surreal layer to an already unsettling case. The investigation, clues that led nowhere. In the aftermath of the fire, authorities conducted a thorough investigation. They examined the ashes, interviewed witnesses, and consulted experts in fire science. However, despite all their efforts, no conclusive answers were found. Theories ranged from simple accidents to complex scientific phenomena, but none could explain all the details of the case. The police were unable to identify a single, definitive cause of the fire. The case was officially ruled as accidental, but the explanation didn't satisfy anyone, especially those who were following the case closely. The cultural impact, a case that refuses to fade. Mary Reeser's death became one of the most talked about cases in the history of unsolved mysteries. The media labeled her the Cinder Woman, and the case became a source of fascination for people interested in unexplained phenomena. Her case sparked renewed interest in spontaneous human combustion, with people researching and debating the subject for decades. Documentaries, articles, and books have continued to examine the strange circumstances of her death, making Mary Reeser a symbol of the unknown in both the scientific and popular imagination. Unanswered questions: the legacy of the strange death of Mary Reeser. As we reflect on Mary Reeser's bizarre and tragic death, the questions remain. Was it simply an accident, or was something more sinister at play? Could spontaneous human combustion be real, or is there a scientific explanation still waiting to be discovered? Why are cases like this so rare, and why do we have so little understanding of the phenomenon? Mary Reeser's death continues to haunt us, challenging our understanding of fire, biology, and physics. Some mysteries are simply too strange to unravel, and this is one of them. And with that, the strange case of Mary Reeser remains unresolved, unforgettable, and utterly bizarre. Thanks for watching.